Welcome again, everybody. This is a mini-grant application workshop for the Michigan Council for Arts and Cultural Affairs mini-grant program. There are 4 different mini-grant programs that I'm going to touch on today. This will not be a step-by-step how to apply in the SMART simple system, but I will be able to direct you to some additional resources. Jen, I hadn't had any audio issues myself, but I'm unsure if anybody else is. Is it doesn't matter if I have background noise going or something?
You're coming in like pixelated on the sound.
I wonder if that's my, oh, I know why. Hold on, folks. I think it's my network. Let me try this one. All right. Is it any better? Yes, no, maybe, maybe not.
A little better.
Keep talking, we'll see.
Okay, we'll see how it goes. Thank you for your patience with that, everybody. So I'll be touching on all 4 of the mini grant programs that are available today. 2 of those programs are specific only to schools. So if it doesn't sound like any of you are with the school, but I want to touch on them anyway for the recording here. So to start, you're going to want to create an account in the SMART Simple system if you have not already done so. That web address is mcaca.smartsimple.com. Where did I write that down? Yes, that's correct. mcaca.smartsimple.com. We do have on the Anton Art Center webpage some instructional videos on how to access and set up your account in Smart Simple. That's www.theartcenter.org/mini-grants. After the session today, I will be sending everybody a cheat sheet document that's got all of the tips and tricks, including these web addresses. So you'll get a good resource after the workshop is over with. Still having sound issues. Let me try one other network here. I usually run Zooms from an iPad, and I'm trying to do it from a laptop today, which is a bit more fully featured. And of course, it's not going to go quite as easily as I hoped. I'm trying yet another Wi-Fi network, so give me posters on how the sound is for everybody. If you have any additional questions, I can always do a follow-up phone call, or we can have email exchange just to make sure that everybody's clear on what is necessary to apply to these programs. So basically, I'm just going to start with with each of the programs individually, and I'll touch on some of the key points there. Then I'm going to talk about some general guidelines stuff, things to watch out for, things to make sure that you're paying attention to, and we'll cover specifically a couple of those related to the budget that you will need to submit. So we'll cover the schools grants first. So any of you who are working with nonprofits rather than schools, this may be good information for you to pass along to anybody you know who works at a school. The first of these is what they call a bus prep grant. These grants are to support transportation costs of an arts or culture related field trip. Applicants must be an accredited school, but this does include public or non-public schools, private schools, home schools, a school district, or ISG. The field trip must take place before June 30th, 2022. Only one girl will be awarded per educational institution. A certified teacher who's leading the field trip must be the primary contact on the girl. Travel and expenses associated with student competitions or performances are not eligible for this grant program. incomplete applications or trips without specific dates and applications without transportation estimates will not be considered. Anybody who's applying can use an estimated travel date. We can always update the records later, but that field will need to be populated in the application form in order for the application to be considered. Private or personal transportation costs are not eligible. So if there's a parent driving a student rather than taking a bus, that parent's costs would not be eligible for support. These grant awards are a reimbursement award. There's no money up front. The school will need to be ready to pay for the costs and then submit documentation of the cost for a reimbursement. Grant requests can exceed $500. There is no match required for this grant, though. These grant applications are reviewed on a first come and first served basis. When money's gone, the money's gone. There is not a panel review component to these grant applications. The application deadline for the bus grant grants is April 15th, 2022 at 5 p.m. So schools or teachers who are interested in applying for the funds anytime between now and April the 15th. Any questions on bus grants? Moving on. The next application, the next grant program is our art supply and equipment grants. This is also a schools-based program. So this program is intended to pay for art supplies or equipment, including repairs to equipment that are being used in a classroom or school setting. And it does include all art disciplines, dance or theater or visual arts or music. It is not restricted to one type of art form. Purchases and repairs must take place by June 30th, 2022. Again, similar to the bus grants, applicants to this program must be an accredited school, either public, non-public, private, homeschooled, school district, or the OM Head Start programs eligible as well. Applicants may only receive one art supply and equipment grant in any school year for a particular school building. So if there's a particular, like a school, if Jones Elementary applies for a grant and receives it, they cannot apply for another grant for this program in the same year. And institutions, schools that receive a grant award are not eligible to apply in the following year. This award may not be received for 2 consecutive years. A certified teacher must be the primary contact. Furniture that becomes furniture or equipment that becomes part of the school building is not eligible. Maybe if the school is undergoing renovations or it's a new school that's being constructed. Awards in this case are also reimbursements. Again, the schools should be prepared to pay for the equipment or supplies out of pocket and then submit documentation of those expenses for reimbursement. These grant requests cannot exceed $1,500. These grants are also reviewed on a first come, first served basis. The application deadline for this program also is April 15, 2022. So again, teachers can apply anytime between now and April the 15th. Any questions about art supply and equipment grants? Let's move on to the ones that most of you are interested in. The amounts people can apply for. Jane, for the bus tech grants, it's up to $500. For the art supply and equipment grants, it's up to $1,500. The art projects and the professional and organizational development grants are other amounts, but we're going to get to those in just another moment. You're welcome. So the next program is arts projects. I think this is the program that most of you are most interested in. These grants are intended to provide support for special opportunities to address arts and cultural needs locally. This is generally arts programming. If your organization is doing some kind of arts project or arts program for the community, it's probably eligible for this grant program. Eligible organizations include arts and cultural nonprofit organizations, municipalities, or registered pre-K through 12 institutions. Projects for round 2 funding, which is what we're talking about here today, must be completed between March 1st and September 30th, 2022. Art projects grant requests cannot exceed $4,000, and they do have a required 1-to-1 match of cash or in-kind funds. Eligible expenses under this program include artists' fees, in-state travel or lodging for artists, space rental, marketing, consumable supplies related to an instructional component of the project, staff time directly related to the execution of the program, field trip admissions for the core group of students only if it is integral to an instructional component of the program, and if it includes a guided lesson. Be sure to review the list of ineligible expenses that are in the guidelines. Applicants are eligible to receive 1 arts project award in a fiscal year. Applicants are ineligible to receive an arts project grant if they receive project support or operating support directly from the Michigan Council for Arts and Cultural Affairs. Applicants are strongly encouraged but not required to participate in SMU Data Arts Cultural Data Profiles. Those are available on the web at culturaldata.org. These applications are subject to a panel review, and award announcements will be made by the end of business on February 28, 2022. Excuse me, the application deadline for arts project grants is January 15th, 2022 at 5 p.m. Now, knowing that this is the program that a lot of you are interested in, what are some of the questions that you have about eligibility or projects that maybe you are considering applying for? Any questions at all? Just open it up to the floor here.
I was wondering, I'm looking to get stands made for sculptures, because right now we can't show sculptures at all or any kind of ceramics, any kind of 3D art. Is that something that's eligible or not?
Take a quick look at the guidelines here. It may not be, because it's more a capital request rather than a programmatic request. Let me just verify what it says in the guidelines. I believe that would be an ineligible expense. What the guidelines say is that capital improvements, new construction, renovation, or permanent equipment items may not be purchased using our project.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. You mentioned having 990s that are scheduled to be audited. An audit is not a requirement for this grant program. You will be required to input your budgetary information as part of the application form, but it's only for the project budget. We don't need to see or we don't require any sort of organizational budget documentation. What other questions y'all have? Any other questions about arts projects? Or can I move on to professional and organizational development? I'm going to go ahead and move on then. The final grant program that is under the Minigrant umbrella is professional and organizational development. This is actually a very unique offering just because it is available to both organizations and individual artists or arts administrators. There are very many grant programs that will make grants to individuals. This program is to support ongoing executive education and leadership development for arts and cultural organizations, professional artists, arts administrators, arts educators, and film professionals. For arts and cultural organizations, I already wrote all that down. Professional artist is defined as one who is recognized by his or her peers within the discipline, has a minimum of 2 years working in the discipline, and is compensated for their art form. Activities for professional or organizational development must take place between March 1st and September 30th, 2022. Grant requests for the POD program, that's the acronym we'll use for a professional and organizational development. Grant requests cannot exceed $1,500, and these have a 25% matching requirement of cash or in-kind funds. Grants that are awarded cannot exceed 75% of the total project cost. Eligible expenses in this program include artist, consultant, workshop, or registration fees directly related to a professional development opportunity, travel in or out of state, meals and lodging, or project-related materials. Graduate and undergraduate courses in a degree or certificate granting program where credits or a degree are sought are not eligible for this grant program. Be sure to review the full list of ineligible expenses that are in the guidelines. Excuse me. This grant program is very specifically intended to fund professional and organizational development opportunities. Proposals that are deemed as projects rather than professional development will not be considered. Applicants are eligible to receive funding under this program once per fiscal year. If you are applying as an individual, this is the only case, and we'll come back to this, but make a note, if you're applying as an individual, there's a couple of sections where you have to list an authorized official and the project director. In most circumstances, those need to be different people. But if you're applying for a professional or organizational development grant as an individual, you can list yourself in both of those places. Applications for this program are also subject to a panel review. These award announcements will be made by the end of business February 28th, 2022. The application deadline is January 15th, 2022 at 5 p.m. Are there any questions about the professional and organizational development grants? All right. Next up, I've got some general tips and tricks based on some reviews of knowledge of working with this Minigrant program. I'm just going to kind of run through a bunch of these. And feel free to chime in at any time with questions. I do think that these are going to be some valuable pointers for you as you work to complete an application. First and foremost, review the guidelines for the grant program that you are applying to. This is very important. The guidelines contain step-by-step instructions for setting up your Smart Simple account, as well as completing the application form for your program or project. The guidelines are available on our website, www.theartcenter.org/minigrants. Steps to complete the application may be different for each different grant program. This is part of the reason it's very important to review those guidelines in detail. There are a couple of sections you'll find, and I think I mentioned this in another of my tips and tricks, but there are bullet points located in the guidelines that you should be using as questions to answer in portions of your application form. That's very important. Our website again also contains other helpful information such as Smart Simple account creation instructional videos. As well as important grant dates and contacts, which is me. The Smart Simple system I've mentioned is located at mcaca.smartsimple.com. If you don't already have an account, you're going to want to set up an organization in Smart Simple first. If it does not already have a profile, make sure you use the same login for all of the grants that you may apply to. Write that down and share it with anybody else who may need it or who may be applying to grants on the organization's behalf using that system. If you lose your login information, contact Smart Simple to reset it using a link on the login page. If you are applying for a grant on behalf of an organization, but you are also planning to apply for a professional development grant as an individual, you will need 2 different accounts to do so. Before applying, be sure to create your account or review your existing account for updates or changes that need to be made. This includes the organization information section, the ADA 504 information section, the organizational history / board section, and the demographics section. If you are unsure whether your organization or school already has an account, drop me a line and I can help you figure it out. Complete all sections of the application that are described in the guidelines to ensure your application will be considered. Documents must be uploaded in a PDF format. There are a variety of other formats that may be used if you have alternative media, such as video or audio or images that you want to upload as work samples as well. Hyperlinks don't seem to work very well in the Smart Sample system. So what you may choose to do instead is create a PDF document that has relevant web links inside of it. You may also upload screenshots of the website that you're trying to share with the reviewers, or just copy paste or write out the information from the website into your application that you want reviewers to know about or see. Again, in the guidelines, you'll find some sections with bullet points asking questions about your project. Use those bullet points as questions you're answering. This is particularly important in the project summary tab and in narrative documents, narrative attachments, because those are required for your grant program. The reviewers use those bullet points to assess how well the project fits the funding program, and responding to those in order will help reviewers see whether your project is eligible and form part of the basis for your application scoring. Incomplete or missing responses may negatively impact your application's review. A couple of those grant programs also require a biographical statement. Please be sure that biographies that you submit are clear and relevant to the project. It is helpful to include bios of the project director, key staff or volunteers who are working on the project, and artists involved or leading activities. Have somebody who is not familiar with your organization or project review your application content to ensure that your request will be clear to our reviewers, who may also not be familiar with your organization or project. Don't assume that they will know what you need. Double check with somebody else who may not know, just to get some clarity and make any revisions before submitting your application. If you are awarded a grant, final reporting is a requirement. Be sure to make a note in your calendar of when that final report will be due, and then get it complete on time. Finally, last tip, contact me with questions. I can answer just about any question in a technical sense related to your application, how to complete it, whether you've completed something properly, and so forth. I cannot answer questions about the quality of your proposal or project. That is for the panel to review and make determinations about. What I can do is help make sure that your application is completed correctly and submitted on time. All right, the budget form. Budget documents that are required for the Michigan Council of Arts and Cultural Affairs are always a little convoluted, and people often struggle with completing these properly. In the Smart Simple system, it's gotten a little bit easier than it used to be, but there are still some notes that I'd like to share with you. Be sure to complete all of the applicable sections of the budget form in Smart Simple. This includes the revenue section as well as the expenses section. In the revenue section, please note that all expenses should be listed in the cash or in-kind column as appropriate. There is a column that says MCACA share, but that column is really just to notate where the MCACA dollars got spent. That column does not total into the total expenses on that particular column of that section. So, for example, if you have a $2,000 expense, you should show $2,000 in the cash column. If any of that money was considered to be MCACA dollars, you would note the appropriate amount in the MCACA column. For this example, let's say that it's a $2,000 expense and you're allocating $1,000 from MCACA to that expense. The common error is that people will put $1,000 in the cash column and $1,000 in the MCACA share column. It's incorrect. You would put $2,000 in the cash column, but still put $1,000 in the MCACA share column. I know you're not looking at a copy of the budget form right now, but does that make sense to all of you? That's potentially the most common mistake when completing the budget form. All right. Be sure that your budget balances. This is another common mistake. People show more revenue or more expense. Those two sections should be equal. If they're not equal, review all of the information that you've put into each of those sections just to ensure that they are coming up correctly. Do not include any ineligible expenses in your budget form. That's not to say, for example, that you can't purchase a piece of permanent equipment with an arts project grant. I'm sorry, let me restate that. That is not to say that you cannot purchase a piece of permanent equipment as part of a project that is receiving grant funding, but don't put it in your budget form. The MCACA dollars will not support that purchase, and it should not show up in budget or discuss it as part of your application. You only need to show revenue and expenses in your budget that the MCACA dollars will be spent on. In most circumstances, this just means that you need to reflect enough expense and enough revenue in your budget to have both the award covered as well as your match money. As an example, if your total project is say total $5,000, you can avoid some work on that budget by only including $8,000. If you get a $4,000 grant award, excuse me, you can just show that $8,000 that would be required between the $4,000 reward and the $4,000 from required matching funds. Correct. Those are my notes on the budget. Are there any questions there? I'm sure that once you log into the Smart Schedule system, you may have additional questions. So feel free to contact me. All right. Before I wrap this up, and this is a far cry from the hour that we had this scheduled for, but I've got a couple of common mistakes that I want to share with all of you. The authorizing official and the project director cannot be the same person. They need to be different people. Typically, the authorizing official might be a board president or an executive director of an organization, and the project director is the person who's going to be working to implement the project itself. The only exception to this rule is if you are an individual applying for that professional and organizational development grant, in which case you can list yourself in both of those fields. Again, it's enough. Be sure that your budget is completed properly. And finally, don't wait to the last minute to start your application. Some of what will be necessary for some of these grant programs might take you a little bit of time to pull together and prepare to upload into the system. Give yourself plenty of time. I would recommend making sure that you get everything starting to complete that form and uploading documentation no less than 1 week prior to the deadline. And really, I recommend starting even earlier than that to ensure that you've got enough time to develop your area of document and pull together the key files that you need to submit, iron out any budget details, etc. So that is it. That is all that I have in terms of an overview of those programs and some pertinent details to keep in mind. So let me open it up broadly for questions at this point. Do you have any questions related to your specific project that you'd like to get answered in the context of these programs? If you have other questions related to the mini grants that I can answer for you now. Requirements for the matching funds. Can it be tuition for the project? Yes, it can be. The matching funds requirement is actually pretty flexible. You can use, so we'll use an example here of a $4,000 project. You mentioned tuition, so Maybe this is a big workshop that you're looking to subsidize some of those tuition rates with, or something along those lines. Let's assume you get $4,000 in a grant award. You will be required $4,000 of matching funds. Those can be earned revenue like tuition dollars. Those can be donated revenue like maybe an individual or business makes a contribution to help support that project. It can also be in-kind funds. Let's say you have a staff person who's working on the project, but the grant funds are not paying them directly. The organization is paying them. They're still being paid. So that amount of money could be considered an in-kind contribution. So you can also use volunteer time to cover some of your match from an in-kind standpoint. Very basically, an in-kind contribution would be anything that somebody's paying for that's not the organization necessarily. Most of the rest of those types of expenses would be considered cash expenses and to be listed as such. Does that help to answer your question? Other questions? If anybody else wants to chime in, I'm just going to throw a couple of relevant things into the chat box for all to take note of. My email address, the Art Center web address will give you information. The MCACA address. I think that's about it. One second. If there are no other questions, then I would highly recommend that you visit our website, take a look at those guidelines, and then get in contact if you have any questions after that. Did you have anything else?
I did, and then I was typing, and I was like, I can't type that fast. What if for some reason, like it's probably not going to happen, but if I was not awarded a grant that I had written, what is there feedback, and what does that feedback look like, and in what kind of?
Yes. So the reviewer's comments are recorded in the Smart Simple system, and after the grant review has been completed, you will be able to gain access to the comments of the reviewers. On timing, for example, if you had applied under our round 1 deadline back in August, that was a few months ago, you could use that feedback to revise your application and resubmit it under the round 2 deadline. If the project that you do every year, you could use feedback from the round 2 review to revise your application and submit under next year's round 1 deadline. But absolutely, yes, we were able to provide that qualitative feedback from the reviewers so you can get an idea of where you might have done well or where you could use some improvement. Great. All right. If there are no other questions, then I'm going to go ahead and end the recording. And I will look forward to hearing from any of you if you need any support or any help. The Anton Art Center will be closed between Christmas and New Year's, so I would encourage you to take a look at the guidelines sooner rather than later. Let me know if you do have questions. I'm happy to answer everything after we reopen in January as well. We'll close from the 24th of December through the 3rd of January, and we'll be back in the office on January the 4th. Also give me a call at the office at 586-469. Go ahead and pause this recording then. And thank you everybody for joining us.